So welcome everybody. I just got the signal from our camera person here to start, so we're good. Great to see a full house on a beautiful day. We didn't know what to expect on a perfect day, so thanks so much for coming. A couple things. We've got a whole lineup of programs every Sunday, pretty much now until the end of October. Check your schedule. Our next one is next Sunday. We have somebody from the Minnesota Historical Society talking about the rich Native American life that we've had here for 10,000 years. So I think that'll be a really interesting topic. And then other than that, every week we've really hit some great programs. So come. The programs are sponsored by the Gunflint Trail Association and volunteers and donors and people that just contribute. So all of you, many of you have done that. Thank you very much for that. So I get the rare introduction. I get to introduce a lot of people in this role, but to introduce my daughter is quite a good thing. And I'm going to let her introduce herself, but she's tough and tenacious and has been that way since she was a young child. Her gymnastics coach is here. And so she's from Red Wing, Minnesota, right off the trail. What was the advice she gave to you?
You can do hard things.
You can do hard things. And so let me tell you quickly about the Iditarod. It's a very hard race. It is, to give you perspective, 4 times as many people have climbed Mount Everest as have finished the Iditarod. So it's really, really challenging, and you've got to have a lot of toughness and grit. I'm very proud of her. So let's hear it for Anna Hennessy.
Thanks, everyone. Let me just get this thing up here. Thanks, Dad. I am Anna. That statistic still blows my mind about the Everest and Iditarod finishers. That's crazy. But I want to thank you all for being here today. It is so special to be able to share my story about running Iditarod, because running dogs is something I love most in the world, and to be able to share it with you all is really special. So thank you for being here. And it's particularly near and dear to my heart to talk about running dogs here on the Gunflint Trail, because I actually first stepped on a dog sled here on West Bearskin Lake on the Gunflint Trail. So close to home. Hang on, bear with me as I get the clicker working. Okay, so how did I get into dog mushing? The long and short of it. As my dad was saying, as a child I was a gymnast. When I went to college I ran track. I've always been a competitive person. I like to push myself physically and mentally. And that actually led me to working at a place called Camp Minojin here on the Gunflint Trail, where I was guiding wilderness trips for kids. And it was at Minojin that I learned that they did dog sledding in the winter. And I actually showed up and was like, that's something, I just gotta try it, put my feet on these runners and see what it's like. And it was a pretty blustery day on Bearskin Lake, and I went out behind this little 6-dog team, and I swear in that moment I knew my life was gonna change. That it was so surreal to me, and was just the most exhilarating thing I could ever imagine. So I credit Camp Minojin with first getting me hooked on dog mushing. And after I worked there for a winter, I decided I gotta figure out how to seek out dog mushing next winter, and the winter after that, and the winter after that. So the next year I actually moved up to a little village in the Arctic of Alaska called Bettles, and I ran tours for a lodge in Bettles, and really like kind of got my feet under me with cold weather experience and managing my own dog yard. But Alaska is far from home, because home still really does feel like here in Minnesota. So I actually ended up back in Grand Marais. I started working in the ER here in Grand Marais as a nurse. That's what I do when I'm not running dogs these days. And that's where I met my dear friend Erin Ultimus, who also ran Iditarod this past winter. Many of you maybe know her. And I actually ended up moving on to the property with Erin and her family and their 40 dogs. And I was a dog handler is what they call that position. Basically, I was just their assistant for I think 3 years, and that is where I really learned to competitively run dogs, because Erin is a very skilled racer. Both Erin and her husband Matt have run the bear race many times, and they taught me so much about running dogs competitively and caring for them under those extreme racing conditions. So I did get to race while living at Sawtooth Racing a couple of times, and I of course loved it. And I decided, like, I'm kind of an extreme, I'm a woman of extremes, like, let's see if I can take this to Alaska and race in Alaska. So enter Kathy Frederick to the picture and the Shameless Huskies Kennel. I actually found a post by our dear Kathy on a women's mushing Facebook site, and Kathy was looking for help managing her competitive racing team. And I reached out to her on a whim, and she gave me a phone call and said, you come up to Alaska and give me 3 winters and you can run the Iditarod. And that was really powerful for me. That was the first time someone had like really put that in front of me. Like, she didn't even know me, but she was like, you're going to be capable of this. And that was really life-changing. So I moved up to Alaska. My partner Emily joined me there, and I started racing. And I raced my qualifying races for Iditarod, which are 2 300-mile races and then a 150-mile race. And I did those all within the span of a month, so I really went for it. And I figured, I was like, well, I'm going to train myself to be tired, right? Because I'm going to be real tired during the Iditarod. But Kathy has been really wonderful. She owns the dogs that I run for Shameless Huskies Kennel. And the plan is to go back again this year and run her dogs, who are very beloved to both Emily and myself now. So, what actually is the Iditarod? I always like to circle back to this because it seems like such a far-fetched thing, and some people have never actually heard of the Iditarod, but most of you know it's a 1,000-mile sled dog race through remote Alaska. It runs from Anchorage to Nome. There are 16 dogs per team. The rules fluctuate each year. It can be 14 some years. Last year when I ran was 16 dogs per team. And there are 19 checkpoints during the 1,000 miles. And a checkpoint is usually a village or a place with resources where you can stop, rest, hopefully in a warm spot. You know, often there, of course, are people, checkpoint volunteers, warm food, etc. But it is entirely off the road system. So the only way you can get to these checkpoints is by dog sled or snow machine or bush plane, which is how the race gets most of their volunteers out. So the Iditarod has been going on for 52 years. We're heading into the 53rd. And when Erin and I ran this past year, there were 39 racers that started the race. And a little bit of history, the Iditarod actually follows the historic route of the Serum Run, which brought the first diphtheria vaccine to Nome. And that vaccine was actually brought by dogsled. So Iditarod recreated that route. What's up? Yeah.
What year was that? When the serial number?
Ooh, I want to say.
1922, I think.
Yeah, close. This past year was the 100-year. Yeah, 1922. Thank you. My history buff. So here's a map of the Iditarod. See if I got a little laser. When I think of Iditarod, I think of it kind of in 3 chunks or sections. So the first part through here, you go up and over the Alaska Range, which is a huge mountain range in Alaska. That's where Denali is, you know, the tallest mountain in North America. So you go up and over the Alaska Range in these first 400 miles or so. And then you see here the route goes either north on the even years or it goes south on the odd years. So last year I ran in 2024. We took the northern route and that follows the Yukon River. So you go from this really hilly, like tons of climbing, really technical trail in the beginning to running on the very flat but scenic Yukon River. And then the last part of the race, the third part, is the coast. And that is known for some crazy like coastal storms, really incredible friendly villages on the coast though, like super hospitality. But you are doing a lot of running across frozen sea ice, which it was a new experience for me and the dogs. So how do you prepare for the Iditarod? First of all, the dogs can't just whip out 1,000 miles. It's much like humans, or like if you've been watching the Olympics, these people have been training their whole lives to like accomplish a feat of sorts. So the dogs run at least 2,000 training miles before we actually even get to Iditarod. So we start training in September. We train all the way up to Iditarod, and some of the training miles are in the form of like 300-mile mid-distance races, which is actually really good practice for me as the musher and the dogs kind of getting into a routine of racing. But I consider the training in the months leading up to Iditarod to be a full-time job. Like it is all your energy almost every day. Packing, and more packing. So as I mentioned, all the checkpoints at Iditarod are off the road system, and you can send yourself supplies via bush plane to each checkpoint. And the amount that you have to send to feed of food that you have to send to feed 16 dogs is kind of wild when you think about the fact that they are running 1,000 miles. So I thought that I was an experienced packer going into Iditarod. Like I've guided 6-week expeditions with, you know, bigger groups of people, but this was a new level, I tell you. Like we spent weeks packing bags of kibble, chopping meat, packaging that up to send out for the dogs to eat. And then of course, like this photo here is actually just a photo of my food that I packed for myself on the trail, and I don't even think that was all of it. So the packing was a significant process. I was lucky to have a lot of help. That's my friend Skylar, who you see on the living room floor posted up with the Oreos, helping me pack my food for the race. So between 1,300 pounds to 2,000 pounds per team is packed out and shipped to each checkpoint, to the villages along the route. Yeah.
Do you have to be weight conscious with the food, or can you just, I need 2,000 calories, so I just whatever it weighs?
You pay per pound, so that makes people weight conscious, but mostly, like I went off a guideline of somebody told me if you have less than 1,500 pounds, you should be worried that you haven't packed enough for your dogs to eat. So my goal was to get over 1,500 pounds. I think we came out at like 1,700 in total. Yeah. And you can see here, these bags all lined up are labeled with the checkpoint that they're going to be shipped to. And that's actually how they're thrown into the plane and shipped to each checkpoint, is in those bags. So once all the bags were packed and shipped, there was just like a week of let's take a deep breath, because we've done everything we possibly can to be ready, right? So the Iditarod holds like a pre-race toast. They bring all the mushers together. There are a lot of kind of celebratory activities where fans can come and have posters signed, and I was very lucky to have my good friend Erin there alongside me, so that whole thing felt a little less lonely than it might have otherwise, because I was nervous as heck, let me tell you. They have a big dip draw. When you take off from the start of the race, you leave in 2-minute intervals. So you can see here I'm on stage. I think I drew bib 25? I should know that. 26? 25, yeah. Yeah. So kind of a fun part of the Iditarod is that they do a ceremonial start in downtown Anchorage. And I felt really excited for this, because people from honestly all over the world come to watch the start of Iditarod, and that was really special to me, to like be able to share this thing that I had worked so hard for with people who were like as excited about it as me. But I also was really nervous because they actually truck snow into the streets of Anchorage for these 11 miles that you run. So the trail is not great, and you have a huge audience, and you're whipping around 90-degree turns, and you have a tag sled, which is like I'm on the main sled, and then I have somebody actually riding a sled behind me, and I have a rider in my sled as well. So I was really nervous that, you know, I might dip it in front of all of these fans, but you can see here the concentration on my face. That's Kathy, the kennel owner behind me, who is riding the tag sled. So it was super fun to be out there with her. And then the next day is the real deal. And the Iditarod starts in a little place called Willow, which is about 30 minutes from where our kennel is located. So I actually got to sleep in the morning of the race, or I tried to, knowing it would be my last bit of sleep I'd have for a while. And the start is at 2 p.m. And that is when you leave the starting line, you have your sled packed with, you know, all your mandatory gear that the race requires. So a sleeping bag, a cooker to feed your dogs, a lot of emergency equipment, and then also, you know, snacks and food for yourself and the dogs until you get to the next checkpoint, and hopefully you get your resupply. So you can see us here right at the start line. These are my trusty leaders that I chose for the start. This is Llama. She's 10 years old. She is now retired. That was her last big run, but she was kind of like one of my ride or dies, because she had finished Iditarod a couple times before and was just very trusty. And then this crazy girl is Ashley. She's only 4 years old, but she is absolutely fearless, which makes her a very good leader, because she will pull the team of dogs and myself and the sled through pretty much anything I ask her to. And she's a little bundle of energy, obviously. So they let us out of the chute on that first day. Something I like to point out is all the dogs wear booties, and they wear booties throughout the entire race. And their booties get changed out at every checkpoint. So every time they stop, they take their shoes off and they take a nap, and then those booties go right back on before the next leg. Some of the dogs get some chafing under their armpits from the harness, so you can see Ashley is in a little t-shirt here. Well, here's a little video of the start to give you a taste of it. My mom cheering. Oh my.
Now come to the chute, please. Give them more.
So the first two checkpoints of Iditarod are Yetna and Squetna. And my first obstacle per se of the race was the moose. And some of you, if you have heard Erin talk at all, have heard her talk about the moose. But what happened is in Iditarod there's a rule that if you encounter a moose on the trail and it is a danger to your dog team, you can shoot the moose. But you have to gut the moose before you are allowed to move on. Which is wild and mind-blowing to me. I don't have much experience with firearms or hunting, so I don't carry a firearm personally. But the moose are a significant danger because they like a hard-packed trail just as much as a dog team does, and they don't like to share it. But what happened is Erin and I were both running along kind of late in the night after we had gone through Squetna, and some snowmobilers actually pulled up and they were like, "Be careful, there's a moose ahead on the trail." And I think both of us were like, "Oh no," Erin said she got her ski pole out and she was ready to do something with that. I was just feeling a little worried myself. But what they didn't tell us was that the moose was actually dead. And so these dog teams were running up and over this moose that had died or been shot because it was a danger to one of the teams and was just in the middle of the trail. So that was honestly the most eerie feeling to me, to run right past a moose in this dark snowy night, and the dogs thankfully didn't stop for anything. They just went right on through. But yeah, I think that was Dallas Seavey actually who ended up shooting that moose, and he was the winner of the Iditarod, but must have held him up.
And some controversy.
Yeah, there was some controversy about it. Yeah, there was controversy that with this rule that the moose has to be gutted correctly, which takes a lot of time, which is something you don't have when you have a team of dogs screaming to keep running, So here is a checkpoint of Finger Lake, mile 123. I'm just starting to get a little tired at this point. I like these photos of the checkpoint though because it gives you a good idea of the layout of a checkpoint. They park the dog teams in what they call the dog yard. In these neat little rows, they get straw, they get to take a nap, they live the good life. Some checkpoints have a building for the mushers to sleep in. Other checkpoints like Finger Lake have these little wall tents. And I think going into Iditarod, I was like, oh man, the wall tents, that's gonna be a rough time. But I actually had some really good naps in these wall tents. They are warm. Most of them actually would have a place for you to hang up your gear, and I would get real cozy in my sleeping bag. And sometimes when you're sleep deprived enough, it doesn't matter where you're sleeping, I think. Oh, this is an image of, people often ask how do you feed your dogs and what do you cook their meals in? This is an image of actually my giant cooker. So you see that flame there. That is actually, we use heat, H-E-E-T, to create that flame and boil a giant pot of water, and that melts frozen meat and kibble to create kind of like a giant stew for the dogs, which is both very caloric and hydrating as well. So here's Rainy Pass, and you can see we're kind of getting into the mountains here. I was really excited to see Rainy Pass, but it was very snowy at this point in the race, so I didn't see much of the mountains. But after Rainy Pass, which is like the high point of the race, you descend through something called the Dalzell Gorge. And this is known to be a really technical part of the race. A lot of mushers lose their teams, they break their sleds, they get injured. So I think I felt pretty nervous about this segment, right? Like it felt high risk to me. And I don't think I quite conceptualized that when you're going through a gorge, like you truly are running just on these narrow trails along these steep sloping gorge walls. And the trail actually like doesn't do you any favors by staying on one side. It likes to like dip back and forth and cross the river at the bottom of the gorge. So we were crossing a lot of open water going through the gorge too, which is why I was really grateful to have my fearless girl Ashley, because she would just, you know, pull us right through that open water, which is really scary for a lot of sled dogs. But you can see in this photo, after the gorge, I had this blister on my finger from hanging onto my sled so tightly. That's like even through my mittens and everything. And my sled did suffer a little injury going through the gorge as well. I started to kind of wonder towards the end of the gorge. I was like, wow, these dogs are really feeling it, or I don't have very good stopping power. And I actually looked down at my brake and realized that half my brake had fallen off somewhere, and I had no idea where it happened. But this spike right here is supposed to be duplicated on the other side, and then my foot steps down on this bar to kind of like claw into the snow and slow things down. So at this point in the race, I was thinking that I would continue on for the next how many 100 miles with only half a brake. This is just some imagery of entering the gorge. It got a little too crazy once I was in it to take a video. So after the gorge, there's really no break because you enter something that most of the mushers refer to as the burn, which is an area of trail that is known to be really wind blowing because I don't remember what year it was burned, but it's like very windy and there's no tree cover to stop the wind at all, and there's not much snow cover because of the wind. So the trail that you are running on is actually just like, it looks almost like a dirt footpath. And I think I didn't realize how hard that would be on my body and the sled. Like normally on the snow it's cushy, you can kind of sail along, but when you are on a bumpy dirt footpath, let me tell you, I felt my brains rattling. But this part was really fun for the dogs. They like loved the new smells and the open ground, and they really gave me a ride through here. Yeah, but one thing that was incredibly mind-blowingly beautiful to me was when you were running across the frozen lakes in this section, they also were open. There was not much snow cover, and you can see here in this photo we were just running across this beautiful blue glacial ice. I was always worried I would lose the trail, of course, but you could see these tracks from the sleds who had gone before me, which was nice.
I think this is the buffalo tunnel. They saw some buffalo poop.
This area is also known to have herds of buffalo that live there.
I don't actually know.
You can kind of see how much we're bouncing along.
There's mushing on the ground with half a break. Everyone told me this stretch was going to be
How many
way.
days were you into the
At this
competition
point, it's still early. I think this was like day 2 or 3. Yeah. So we haven't even hit 300 miles at this point. But like I was saying, the beginning of the race, they really try and like weed you out. They're like, let's give you the toughest trail right away. This is just a picture of my team. They were seeking out any type of water they could get going through the burn area, because normally they will dip for snow to hydrate themselves, but like I was saying, there's not much snow in the burn. So they took me on a little ride off trail here to a frozen pond just so they could kind of lap at the surface water. This is how I felt at this point in the race. I actually don't have much documentation here because I think, yeah, we're getting into mile 200 to 300 and I was starting to get very tired at this point. So here's just a little cozy pile of my front 4 dogs. So, Chik-Wauk is a little village that I had chosen where I would be taking my 24-hour rest. And that is a part of the race that's like very looked forward to, because for 24 hours it's mandatory that you stop and you rest as the musher, and your dogs get to rest and recoup and eat as much as they possibly can. So I chose to stop in Chik-Wauk, which was special because my dad actually decided to volunteer for the Iditarod, and he was placed in Chik-Wauk. So if you want to come up and talk about it, Dad, that'd be awesome.
I would. When I got to Chik-Wauk, by the way, why don't you play the video first, and then I'll tell you what happened. She's arriving. This is about a good third of the way of through the race.
Look at that team.
This is the Iditarod.
All right, looking good.
This isn't me talking.
Little reunion.
I'm in the blue hat there.
She's gonna do her 24. I don't think she knew he was gonna be the checker.
I didn't. I was like, that's a lot of responsibility for him.
So,
I don't think the dogs want to do a 24.
they were very good shape. So I asked her, how much sleep did you have so far? So think about that, it's day 3 or 4, and she said, I think I've had 2 45-minute naps. So virtually no sleep. So it was good timing. Great for me to be a volunteer. This is a native village. The only way to access it is by plane, bush plane. So I got to fly in, and I did all the chores for the mushers, laid out straw, scoop poop, whatever needed to be done, and check people in and out. And the only thing that they required of me is that I had camped out before at 40 below zero. So I thankfully had actually a number of nights. So that was the criteria. I got to actually eat a meal with Anna, a couple meals actually. And then I got to send her out. So if you want to cue that up.
Yeah.
Oh, there's, that's where she slept. That was her little, she slept in a church.
Yeah. So it was nice. I got to lay out all my things on the church pew. I actually was so happy about that, and it was home sweet home, and I finally got to catch up on sleep for, 6 hours at a time, because you have to go out and feed the dogs like every so often.
And I could not help her with her chores because that's the Iditarod. They have to do everything themselves. So I was helpless just watching her work. It was hard.
Did they have a hot tub in that town?
Yeah, no hot tub, no hot tub. And so she was leaving, and as a father, it's like, oh my gosh, I knew, number one, I knew the weather forecast, and I knew it was going to get really, really cold. And I knew she was heading out into really absolute wilderness. It was really hard on me. She had started out from Takatna and made, the dogs were heading back to Anchorage, basically. So she had to get them rerouted. And that was our fault. We didn't steer her in the right direction. But you can listen to this. This is her leaving.
Well, right here, like right by the building right there. Yeah.
Come back. I don't have my other number.
Oh, this is being checked in.
Here we go.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Sorry. And then.
Oh, I think I maybe don't have it in there.
Oh, okay. No worries. Anyway, I sent her off, and it was a real hard dad moment, knowing that she had such, incredible conditions to go. So.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think in the video of me leaving, you can hear my dad saying, "You're going in the right direction now." Oh my. Anyways, one other really special part of leaving Takatna was that I actually did get to continue on the race with Ashley, this leader that I've continued to talk about. Ashley, throughout the season leading up to Iditarod, had been kind of working through a front end injury in her pec muscle, and right about when we would hit 300 miles for a race or training, she'd start to get sore and I'd have to leave her behind. So I actually expected that I would have to drop her into Takatna. And when you drop a dog, they stay with the vets and they fly home and they get all the love, right? Like, it's okay for them. But I knowingly brought Ashley on the race, thinking I'd have to drop her into Takatna. I brought the vets over and said, I'm going to drop my leader here. And I got her up to kind of walk her and see if she was stiff. And she just popped up off the straw and looked like healthy as can be. And the vets were like, why did you need us over here? And I said, never mind. So just, you can leave us be. So I did actually get to continue on the race with Ashley at this point. And she is just, I can't tell you how much a difference it makes to have like a trusty leader or a dog that you know will kind of pull you through anything. So she was a little confidence in my back pocket. After leaving Takatna, we are heading into the interior of Alaska here. Cripple is a little checkpoint that is getting really close to halfway, and I had some of my, like, when I think back on it, most lovely runs through this area. The trail was beautiful. It was easy enough that I could relax on the sled a little bit. I wasn't getting any more of those blisters from going through the gorge. Sometimes the distance between checkpoints is greater than 50 miles. And for my team, we didn't like to run the dogs further than 50 miles without stopping at a checkpoint or stopping to camp. A lot of my team was made up of 2-year-old dogs, and mentally you want to keep them thinking that they can do anything, right? Because they have a big future ahead of them. So we never ran more than 50 miles without stopping. If we couldn't get to a checkpoint within 50 miles, we would stop and we would just camp at the side of the trail. And I actually liked doing this because it was pretty peaceful. I felt like I could get my dog chores done a little faster and without distraction. So this is just a little video, I think, of me camped out in my sleeping bag and the temperature is starting to drop.
Hello from inside my sleeping sleeping bag. This thing is a dream. It's so warm in here. I'm camped at the side of this trail with the dogs for about 5 hours.
Very tired, clearly very tired.
Hello.
Sorry. So we continued on through the Yukon River, which was incredibly beautiful, nice flat trail. The temperature on the Yukon really started to drop. I think I had the coldest feet of my whole life on one of the legs that we ran on the Yukon. Up until we got to the Yukon, the temperature had been like between maybe 10 below to 10 above. Once we hit the Yukon River, which is actually known for being cold, the temp dropped to 30, 40 below. Kaltag to Unalakleet. So Kaltag marks the end of the Yukon River. Unalakleet is the first village on the coast, like when you're going to hit that sea ice. Going from Kaltag to Unalakleet, though, is the longest stretch of the race. It's 80 miles, and you aren't going to run into anything out there other than one little shelter cabin. And let me tell you, I was so happy to find this shelter cabin because when I left Kaltag, I left in the middle of the night, and as we were running along, I started to feel really cold, and I often would kind of gaslight myself and be like, it's not that cold, you're being a wimp. And this night I actually checked my thermometer and it was 50 below, and I was very cold. I was miserable. I thought it can't get much colder than this, right? Like my thermometer bottoms out at 60 below. Another hour passed. I looked down at my thermometer and it had bottomed out at 60 below. That part of the race was not so fun. I remember just saying to the dogs, I want to be inside. They didn't mind it though. They ran like they always did. But here you can see us. We've reached the shelter cabin and we are just napping in the sun. The temperature bumped up to like maybe 30 below when the sun came out the next day. Here you can see I've reached the shelter cabin, and these are actually, those are all my layers. They are nobody else's. And those are just my outer layers, not what's actually still on my body. So you can see them drying after I'd been out in the cold that night. Just a photo of my leader Portia here and Ashley, who is still running. At this point in the race, we're in like mile 700 or so, and the fatigue is really setting in. Like my dad was saying, I really could only sleep for 45 minutes to an hour each time we stopped. This video kind of shows the sleep deprivation.
Waking up in the night after sleeping 1 hour is really hard.
The checkpoints do all have coffee. Cheers. So yeah, I leaned into the coffee game for sure. I would drink it as right when I woke up and then throughout the time on the sled as well. Here you can see that we have reached the village of Shaktoolik, which is known for being really windy. It's really incredible because the Iditarod trail takes you up and over these hills that you can kind of see in the background of this photo, and you get to view Shaktoolik down below. And I actually crested those hills in the dark, and Shaktoolik way out on the sea ice looked like some spaceship or something very alien. And it felt like it took 1,000,000 years for us to actually get to that village because I could see it for so long. Shaktoolik takes you to the sea ice crossing, which is about 50 miles, completely across frozen sea ice. This gets really eerie for the dogs. They know that they are on ice, definitely, and there is nothing to look at. And a coastal storm can blow in and drop visibility to 0 within, minutes. So the Iditarod officials actually recommended that for most rookies that you find a buddy and do this stretch with a buddy. So it worked out pretty well that my little friend Laura here and I crossed the sea ice together. We actually would take turns leading the way to give our teams a break, because the dogs really like to actually chase another team. So that was so helpful for my young team, especially, who had never run on this like blank white canvas slate before. This photo kind of gives you an idea of just you can see nothing. I also like this photo because you can see the dogs' tails blowing in the wind. At this point in the race, mile 852, the dogs are eating 10,000 calories per day. So when we are out and actually running, we are stopping every hour and a half or so, and they are eating snacks. And a snack for the dogs looks like a giant hunk of salmon or like a half-pound of frozen beef, and they will gobble up just about anything at this point. Their metabolism is so high. This is just a view of the coast. The lighting on the coast was incredible. I felt like this twilight hour would last forever. So as I got further and further into the race, my checkpoint routine and care for the dogs became a little longer. You can see this is one of my wheel dogs, Lorikins. She started to get a little bit of a sore wrist into the race, which I would treat just by wrapping it and massaging it at each checkpoint, which of course then cut into my sleep time, but it was always of course worth it to have good dog care. But you can see her and Regal behind her kind of basking in that warm midday sun. The dogs also take supplements throughout the whole race, antioxidants and acid reducers for their stomach. This video is of Ashley, I think, taking pills for the day.
Time for your pills. Time for your pills.
She chews them, I don't know why.
Okay. Vitamin E. Ashley, here's your next pill.
Most of the Iditarod is spent just alone on your sled with your dogs, unless you're crossing the sea ice with a buddy. But the checkpoints are actually filled with volunteers, and I would get so excited in like the hour leading up to a checkpoint to interact with these people who I didn't even know, right? And I'm like somewhat introverted, but it was just such an isolating experience that I loved getting to a checkpoint and like having my 10 minutes of snacks and socializing with the volunteers. White Mountain is the last stop on the Iditarod Trail, and at this point in the race I felt like I think I've made it, but but a lot of bad things happened on that last leg to people. I had heard all the horror stories of people getting stuck in storms and not actually making it to Nome. So I really had my fingers crossed here at White Mountain. And the final stretch to Nome was 77 miles, and that one we actually did do all in one go since it was the last leg. This was a very happy moment for me and the dogs. You can see us cresting the hill, and we actually get to see the open sea for the first time. And I knew that Nome was up and around the corner to the right. The last stretch is known, as most of the coast is, for extreme wind. There's a really famous spot called the Blowhole, which is like maybe 3 or 4 mile stretch where the wind just like really blows. I don't think we had it bad this year, but in this video you can see the dog's ears and tails just blowing in the wind. loud. But since I didn't have any crazy wind, the world thought we needed one last obstacle. And some of you have heard this story before, but as we were coming around the corner to climb that last hill to get to Nome, some snowmobilers pulled over and stopped me, and they were like, "There's a muskox in the trail ahead." And I was like, "A muskox?" You know? I'm like rifling through my brain to even conjure up an image of a muskox at this point. I'm like, okay, what do I do with the muskox? And they had no information for me. So the dogs and I just continued on, and we rounded the corner of the trail, and sure enough, there is a muskox right in the middle of the trail. It looks like, really like this photo. I pulled that off the internet, but that is what that muskox looked like. And it was huge, bigger than a moose, huge. And of course I stopped the dogs, and we sat there for a minute, we looked at it, and I kind of yelled at the muskox a little, like thinking maybe it would move or get off the trail. And instead it looked at us, and it did a big huff and like shook off all that crazy hair, and then it laid down in the middle of the trail. I was like, come on, I just want to go see my mom, I'm so close, like we've made it this far. And so the dogs and I are just looking at this thing, and I am really uncertain how long I'm going to have to wait to get past this giant creature. And those snowmobilers who had originally warned me about the muskox must have had a change of heart, because they actually came back to check on me. And they offered to blaze us a trail around the muskox through the really deep snow. And they kind of gave us like a whole escort, which was amazing, because I don't know how we would have gotten past this muskox. The rule in Iditarod is you can accept outside help as long as it is available to everyone. So that made it okay for the snowmobilers to help our team. But this is kind of a fun, can you see it up there? Video. Someone got some drone footage of my team waiting behind the muskox on the trail. So it goes pretty quick, but kind of look for the giant blob in the trail. That's the muskox here. And saw that my little dot stopped for a while right before Nome. Now you know why. This is really close to the very end. Someone recommended that I take a selfie with my leaders, so here we are. And you can see I'm very close now to Nome. We are like maybe a mile away, and we had people out on the sea ice kind of cheering us in, which was really special. And I love the look on my face here. You can tell I'm like filled with some relief. And we finally made it. I think our finishing time was just about 11 days. And the feeling of pulling into Nome was unlike any other. I still really struggle to describe it other than elation maybe, but there's a little video of the very end, which I can play for you.
Congratulations.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Let's get a
Yeah,
snow in.
thank you. Hi. Hi there. Wow. We made it. Hi, Mom. Oh, for the last time.
Anna Hennessy signing in, as she said, for the last time on her rookie Iditarod, 11 days, 2 hours, 41 minutes, and 38 seconds. Congratulations. I don't know how long how does that prepare you for the challenges you might face coming down a 1,000-mile dog sled race?
In a lot of ways. You have to be quick on your feet and kind of always expect the worst and expect the unexpected, so a lot of it translates well. But also, caring for dogs and caring for patients, you got to be a caring person in a lot of ways, so enjoy caring for people and things and creatures.
In the facing challenges, how do you keep your positive attitude?
Speak up, please! How do I keep my positive attitude? Yeah. I would say during Iditarod this past 11 days, whenever things got hard or rough or I was hungry or tired, I just try to remember, like, I am doing the thing I've dreamed of doing for so long, and I'm running Iditarod right now, and that really kept me upbeat, and like also knowing that I'm out there with the dogs is always brings me joy and keeps me positive.
It sounds like you might have had a little bit of an adventure just down the trail where there's some critters around.
Oh yeah, yes. I thought that I was getting so close to Nome. I'm calling up the dogs, and suddenly there's a muskox in the middle of the trail. And instead of moving, it just kind of took a look at us and laid down right in the middle of the trail. And so I watched it for a while, and then we eventually detoured around it. Yeah.
If you whistle, they wake up.
True?
True, I did it. Is there any particular dog on this team that stands out that you want to recognize?
Probably my leader, Ashley. She just was really phenomenal the entire way and really consistent, and whenever things were scary or hard, she really stepped up, and she's pretty fearless, which is something I really like in a leader.
Well, congratulations, Anna. You have finished your rookie Iditarod in 24th place in 11 days, 2 hours, 41 minutes, and 38 seconds. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Here's the star of the show right here.
Dogs get into any skirmishes?
Not too bad, no.
This is the real deal. So she led most of the way.
Let's see. Yeah, so this is my special guest, Ashley. She does come to Minnesota and lives with my partner Emily and I in the summers, and she is an amazing creature because she sleeps in my bed every night in a warm house and then somehow survives at 60 below and does her job as a sled dog as well. But she's very friendly and loves attention if you want to say hi to her afterwards. But truly 1,000 thank yous, like, to all of you who have just shown interest and for all your support. Like, I really felt people's support while I was out there on the trail, and like, I often joke that I became a musher actually because I would be surrounded by people all the time. I have the most incredible partner, family, and handling team. Like, I couldn't do it without them. So yeah, 1,000 thank yous.
And you did tours at where in Cook County? Gunflint
At Gunflint Lodge, yes, yeah.
And Bearskin Lodge.
Yeah, truly. So let's see. I want to take some time for questions if you have any. Yeah, what's up?
So how long do you and the dogs sleep in Nome, and then how long were you in Nome before you went back from the Anchorage?
Good question. So I was in Nome for 5 days. The dogs were in Nome for 2. And that's pretty typical. They'll stay 2 days, recover. They get fed every 6 hours round the clock by my amazing handlers. And then they fly back to Anchorage after the race. Yeah.
Did you make it through with all 16 dogs?
Good question. I finished with 12, but I did make it to the halfway point with 15 dogs. So yeah.
And the winners have how many dogs?
Like 5 or 6. Yeah. So it was a goal of mine to finish with a bigger team.
So you said you do about 2,000 miles of training that year before you started out. How many dogs did you start out with doing those 2,000 miles?
Ooh, like what's the pool? Yeah. Last year, I believe we had 26 dogs that were, considered potential race dogs for Iditarod. And then when I was actually picking my team, I was picking from 21 or 22. So that was hard decision making. Yeah. What's up?
So you often hear over the years of mushers who take a left at the wrong spruce tree and end up somewhere. You must have better navigational things or trail markings.
The trail markings were really good. Like, I gotta give it to the trail crew for Iditarod. They put trail markers out like very frequently, so I rarely had to worry if I was going the right direction. The trail markers are I don't know how to describe them, just like posts that are maybe this high with some reflective tape on the top. Yeah.
In what place did you finish and how many starters dropped out?
Oh, good question. I finished in 24th place and there were 39 people who started. I actually don't know how many people scratched, but
about a quarter of the field.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it actually a particular breed of dog?
All of the dogs are Alaskan Huskies, which is kind of an umbrella term for these dogs who have just been bred for speed and endurance. So genetically, they're really diverse. Yeah, and she falls into that category. Yeah.
I think I read someplace that for you, the tenacity and the strength and the compassion to do this race and for your dogs translates directly into your role as an emergency room nurse.
Yeah, very much so.
They translate directly. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I often feel, like I kind of said, you got to think fast and like really advocate for your patients or your dogs in these like pretty urgent situations. So, yeah.
Can you tell us the setup on the sled? It looked like you had a place you could sit on the very back of the runners.
Yes.
And then you have to take a lot of equipment, survival equipment and food and stuff with you. Do you have to tie yourself in so you don't fall asleep and fall off that thing?
Some mushers will, like they'll tie their wrist onto the handlebar so that if they fall asleep, they are still going to be attached to their sled. I had some very sleepy moments, but I have kind of an iron grip, so I never tie myself. But we do have an example of a sled up here. This is actually a sprint sled, so it's much smaller than the one that I took on Iditarod. But the one that I took on Iditarod has it's like a back compartment as well, and I could sit down, rest my back on that back compartment, which was really super nice.
Stand the whole time.
Yeah. Yes.
So did you fix your brake?
I never circled back to that. Actually, I did, yeah. My handler, Jake, who was back at the kennel with the dogs who didn't run, was able to take a brake spike off another sled. And he overnight shipped it, actually, to Tacotna, and we did get to put it on my sled. So, yeah, that's good people. Yeah.
So how many calories did you need to consume every day to run through that?
So many. I never really counted, but I never felt super hungry, I think, from the stress and the cold, but I was eating so much. Like, I always joke about my pocket Oreos, but that's a very real thing. Like, I am always pulling Oreos out of my pocket to eat them, like, when I'm out on a run.
Do they give you, like, guides based on as to how much to pack?
No, not at all. Like, mushers will be like, well, this worked well for me and this didn't work well for me. So it's really, I felt personal preference with my own food. Yeah, a lot of junk food, honestly. It's hard to eat healthy things like almonds when you're out there. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're planning to do the race again this year, and you'll start training in September?
So this year, I'm not sure if I will be doing it because our pool of dogs at our kennel can really just field one team. So my partner Emily is going to be doing the race with the same dogs that went with me last year. So follow her, follow the dogs. My goal right now this winter is I'll be doing more of the mid-distance runs leading up to Iditarod and trying to be more competitive in those. Yeah.
So you'll return to Alaska with your dogs
Yes.
and the dogs that are there?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I'm going up in September to start training them and getting them Iditarod ready again. But Iditarod is in my future again someday, for sure. It was the hardest thing, but I'm hooked.
How do you do sponsorship, fundraising? How does that work?
That is a huge part of Iditarod because it is so expensive to run this race. I did something that was really helpful. I had an opportunity for people to sponsor individual dogs on the team, which was so helpful. I had some businesses donate and like support my entry fee to enter the race, and I couldn't have done it without the financial support, truly. So yeah, that's a whole like front end aspect for sure. Alrighty, well, I'll wrap it up, but please come say hi to Ashley. Feel free to stand on the sled if you want. I'll be around for a little while, but thank you all so much for coming.